You can't afford what we're serving in there. Head bouncer Clint Reardon blocked the entrance to Azure Sky Lounge, his muscular frame filling the doorway as the midday sun cast sharp shadows on the sidewalk. Desmond Cole stood calmly in his casual Friday outfit, watching three college kids in torn jeans and flip-flops get waved through without even showing ID. The fluorescent lights from the club's interior created a bright backdrop as more patrons gathered to watch. "I haven't even tried to pay yet," Desmond replied with a slight smile, pulling out his phone to document the interaction. "Look," Reardon said louder, his green polo shirt reflecting the natural skylight. "This place has a certain clientele. You'd be more comfortable somewhere else. Trust me." The growing crowd shifted uncomfortably as phones began recording, but none of them knew they were watching a Super Bowl champion being profiled at his own teammates' club opening. Welcome to Frost Folktales. This is where we tell the stories of those who were underestimated, dismissed, and targeted, yet chose courage over silence. If these stories move you, subscribe and be part of a community that refuses to let them fade into the background. Desmond Cole owned a denim blue jeans shirt, which he has worn for every team event over the years. As the sun streamed through the glass entrance of Azure Sky Lounge, the polished floors inside the establishment shone bright. Well-dressed servers operated inside the lounge to prepare for the lunch crowd. Derek went right from practice to surprise teammate Byron Washington at the grand opening of his new fancy spot, never thinking he'd end up on the wrong side of the velvet rope. "Excuse me, sir. Identification and a quick dress code check, please," announced Clint Reardon, his tone sounding rather final. The bouncer's green polo, short-sleeved and fitted across his bulked-up shoulders, folded against his folded arms. In physicality, he was a wall, one that separated Desmond from the entrance. The overhead fluorescent light reflected off his name tag, which identified him as the head of security for the opening. Desmond moved for his wallet, confusion crossing his face as he watched a group of young professionals in similar casual dress saunter past them without any ask for ID. The women in red sundresses and men in khakis and polo shirts, almost identical to his own. Nevertheless, Reardon's attention was all on him. "Sure, here you go," Desmond said coolly, holding out his driver's license with steady hands. Reardon barely glanced at the identification before shaking his head dismissively. "Look, the dress code clearly states business casual or better. Those sneakers and jeans aren't going to cut it for our establishment. We maintain certain standards here." His words carried an edge of condescension as he gestured toward Desmond's spotless white leather sneakers and designer jeans that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Desmond imagined the irony of another group, smartly dressed but evidently less so than he was, nearing the entrance. A man in torn denim shorts and a creased t-shirt laughed loudly with his friends while their flip-flops slapped the concrete pavement. Reardon immediately stepped back and smiled widely, gesturing them inside the doors without question for identification or dress code. "Sorry, but can you tell me what the dress code is?" Desmond asked with a calm expression, although overwhelm of frustration was building up in the pit of his stomach. "The guys who just came in are wearing shorts and flip-flops, making my outfit look less casual." The sun was on his shoulders during the afternoon. The further person was coming out to the entrance. All eyes were on him and the bouncer who was getting agitated. Reardon's face turned red when he saw the obvious contradiction in his enforcing. "That's not the same thing," he stammered. "They're insiders. They possess exclusive rights. I just enforce the rules. I don't make them. This place is designed for a specific group. Honestly, you'd be more at home at one of those places downtown that plays your sort of tune." The racist tone hit Desmond like a punch in the stomach. He didn't want to believe the racism, but he felt his anger rising as it was becoming more blatant. After years of experiencing coded racism on and off the field, he was familiar with the language, but he had never faced the blatant sort in broad daylight before. "My kind of music," Desmond slowly repeated, with his phone now recording as others began bringing theirs out. A man in khakis and a boat shoe socksless ensemble walked in with a red blazer, wearing a girl as natural light streamed in. As soon as Reardon saw them, he switched to professional courtesy, greeting them warmly and theatrically opening the door. He announced cheerfully, "Welcome to Azure Sky Lounge. Please follow me right away, and I will get you seated." Desmond is shocked to see how much better the girl is treating compared to him. "Excuse me, sir," he called out to the couple in a loud voice in the afternoon. "Could you assist me in comprehending something? How would you characterize the dress code here?" The woman seemed befuddled by the inquiry as her partner shrugged. "Honestly," the man replied, glancing at his own casual attire, "I'd say we're pretty underdressed for an upscale place. But they seemed fine with it. We just walked right in." The couple disappeared through the entrance, leaving Desmond and Reardon in an increasingly tense standoff, as more phones captured every word and gesture. "This is ridiculous," a voice called from the growing crowd. "He's dressed better than half the people who went inside." The comment sparked murmurs of agreement from other bystanders, their reactions confirming what Desmond already knew but providing crucial validation for his growing determination to document the discrimination. Reardon's authority was being publicly undermined, and his response revealed the truth behind his motivations. "Listen here, buddy," he said, stepping forward in aggression. "I don't know what game you're playing, but this establishment has standards. Consider visiting the sports bar down the street. They tend to have more experience with individuals such as yourself." The comment prompted audible gasps from those in attendance. It was too much to excuse or dismiss as accidental. "People like me," Desmond repeated placidly, ensuring the phone recorded everything Reardon said. "Can you elucidate your statement?" The question was a challenge to the bouncer to backtrack or else prove that he is really a discriminatory person. With multiple cameras positioned to record the spectacle, the sun was now shining full force. Reardon chose to escalate rather than retreat. "You know exactly what I mean," he snarled, his green polo shirt darkening with perspiration under the bright fluorescent lights spilling from the club entrance. "This place costs money, real money. The kind of money that comes from legitimate careers, not whatever hustle you're running. Maybe save up for a few months and try again when you can afford to tip the staff properly." The classist assumptions, combined with racial profiling, created a perfect storm of discrimination that Desmond recognized would resonate far beyond this single interaction. His phone continued recording as he maintained his composure, years of media training serving him well in this unexpected spotlight. "I appreciate your concern about my financial situation," he replied with controlled sarcasm, "but I haven't actually attempted to make any purchases yet. How could you possibly know what I can afford?" The logical inconsistency of Reardon's position was becoming apparent even to casual observers, many of whom were now actively recording and sharing the content on their social media platforms. The incident was organically developing into something much larger than a simple door dispute, though none of the participants fully understood the magnitude of what was unfolding. Another group of young professionals approached the entrance, their attire consisting of wrinkled khakis and polo shirts that looked like they'd been slept in. Reardon immediately shifted his attention to them, offering warm greetings and expedited entry without any mention of dress codes or financial qualifications. The contrast in treatment was so stark that several bystanders began openly commenting on the obvious discrimination. "Wow," a woman's voice rang out from the crowd. "He's giving everyone else special treatment." After witnessing this, others commented with support all around that latte with the underlying outrage of observation, all to encourage Desmond to document and expose. Desmond saw in this moment something bigger than his personal inconvenience. The cameras were capturing the blatant discrimination, which was an excellent opportunity to cautiously expose systemic racism, which otherwise takes place with no witnesses and evidence. His decision became clear as he saw Reardon's differential treatment of the other patrons. His voice boomed loud enough for everyone to hear. "You know what? I'm going to end it." A broader audience deserves to hear this discussion. Reardon felt a physical chill at the announcement as the conviction went out of him, and he realized what he had been recorded saying. People were encroaching. Desmond's finger stopped over his phone, and everyone felt the day's significant moment was about to happen. The sunlight at noon kept beating on the footpath, and the artificial light was just right for what was going to be a viraling incident that would change things. The fluorescent lights glowing in the club proved to be useful after more folks converged to witness a powerful protest against the everyday discrimination that South Asian people encounter, the fight for which was unfolding on the sidewalk. Reardon asked that nervously. He had really begun to understand that this one situation could have consequences. Do not do anything foolish you will regret. Desmond gazed straight into the camera of his phone, and then at the crowd of friendly faces surrounding him, before finally looking at the still slightly nervous bouncer who had misjudged precisely who he was. The only thing I would regret, he said clearly, is not doing this sooner. With that statement, he opened his live streaming software to show everyone the discrimination before him. Before he pressed the button, Desmond Cole's thumb hovered over the live stream one on his phone for a second. The screen of his social media app opened up, and right away viewers started coming in. The afternoon sun was casting perfect lighting across the entrance of Azure Sky Lounge, and there were many details to notice. "Hey guys, this is Desmond," he said as he faced the camera while holding his phone firm. As Gilbert Waithaka, aka Babes Waithaka, walked into Azure Sky Lounge, he said, "I'm here at Azure Sky Lounge to show you something that is happening here now." His viewers began rising fast as his followers received the notifications. 10 viewers turned into 50, then 100, and then more. Clint Reardon stood behind him near the entrance, his short-sleeved security uniform crisp against his pale skin. The bouncer seemed oblivious to the growing digital audience gathering to watch his every move. He crossed his arms and maintained his position, blocking the doorway with an air of authority that felt more menacing now that it was being broadcast live. "Sir, I already told you the dress code," Clint said loudly enough for the phone's microphone to capture clearly. "No sneakers, no casual wear. This is an upscale establishment." The comments section exploded with activity. Desmond could see messages flooding in faster than he could read them. "That's discrimination," wrote one viewer. "This is insane," posted another. The viewer count had already climbed past 500. Hold up, Desmond said, positioning the camera to show both himself and Clint while keeping the entrance visible in the background. "Everyone watching, I want you to see what's happening here. I'm wearing designer jeans and a polo shirt, trying to get into this place for lunch, and this gentleman here says I don't meet the dress code." As if on cue, 2 white men approached the entrance behind them. One wore ripped jeans and sneakers with an orange t-shirt, while his companion sported cargo shorts and sandals with a green tank top. Desmond quickly angled his phone to capture them as they walked directly past Clint without any challenge whatsoever. "Did everyone see that?" Desmond asked his live stream audience. The comments erupted in outrage. The viewer count hit 1,000, then kept climbing. 2 guys just walked in wearing actual sneakers and shorts. But somehow I'm the dress code violation? Upon realizing he was being filmed, Clint's face reddened. But rather than withdrawing his statement, he further stood behind it. "I don't care about your recording. Rules are rules, and this is a private establishment with the right to refuse service." "Based on what exactly?" Desmond queried, managing to stay calm despite his agitation. His tone was professional, but Clint grew increasingly frustrated. "It is according to our standards," replied Clint in a condescending manner. "You may feel more comfortable somewhere else, where it is more appropriate for your lifestyle." The comment section absolutely exploded. Viewers were typing in all caps, sharing the stream, and tagging friends. The viewer count passed 1,500 and showed no signs of slowing. Several comments indicated people were recording the live stream on their own devices, ensuring the moment would be preserved even if something happened to the original stream. My lifestyle, Desmond repeated, making sure his audience caught the implication. And what lifestyle would that be? A woman wearing a red blazer exited the club before Clint could reply. She had blonde hair and was frowning, and didn't appear to be happy with the sound at the door of the establishment. She demanded, "What's happening here?" "Hi, I'm Diane Caldwell, Azure Sky Lounge's manager." "Perfect timing," Desmond said to his live stream, now approaching 2,000 viewers. "The manager is here. Maybe we can get this sorted out." He addressed Diane directly. "Ma'am, I'm trying to understand why I'm being denied entry when other patrons in similar or more casual attire are being admitted without question." Diane looked at Desmond, then at Clint, then seemed to notice the phone camera for the first time. Her eyes narrowed as she processed the situation. Instead of de-escalating, she moved to stand beside Clint in a show of solidarity. "Our staff has the training and authority to make appropriate decisions about our dress code," she said firmly. "If you've been asked to leave, then I suggest you respect that decision." The live stream comments became a blur of activity. Viewers were not just expressing outrage now, but actively organizing. Someone had created a hashtag that was starting to trend. Others were sharing the stream link across different social media platforms. The viewer count hit 3,000 and kept rising. "So to be clear," Desmond said, making sure his phone captured both Diane and Clint clearly, "you're both standing behind this decision, even after what everyone just witnessed with the other patrons?" "Absolutely," Diane replied without hesitation. "We maintain high standards here, and not everyone meets them." As she spoke, another group approached the entrance. 3 white women in yoga pants and sneakers, chatting loudly about their workout, walked directly past the management team and into the club without even a glance from security. "Are you kidding me right now?" typed one commenter, echoing the sentiment of thousands of others watching in real time. Desmond didn't need to say anything. The evidence was speaking for itself, broadcast live to an audience that was growing by the minute. Comments indicated that sports fans were recognizing him and sharing the stream in NFL fan groups and sports forums. "Wait, is this Desmond Cole?" read one comment that caught his eye. "The wide receiver? Oh man, these people have no idea who they're messing with." More viewers flooded in as word spread through sports communities. The viewer count hit 5,000, then 7,000. Local news stations were being tagged in the comments by outraged viewers demanding coverage. Clint seemed to realize that things were spiraling beyond his control, but instead of backing down, he took a step closer to Desmond with an intimidating posture. "I think it's time for you to move along, buddy. You're creating a disturbance." "I'm creating a disturbance?" Desmond replied, his voice remaining steady despite the provocation. "I'm standing here peacefully, trying to patronize a business, and you're the one making this confrontational." The comment section was now moving too fast to read individual messages, but the sentiment was overwhelmingly supportive of Desmond and overwhelmingly critical of the club's staff. Viewer numbers approached 10,000 as the story gained momentum across multiple social media platforms. Diane pulled out her own phone and appeared to be making a call, stepping slightly away from the entrance but remaining visible to Desmond's camera. Her conversation was brief and heated, though the words weren't audible over the ambient street noise. "Ma'am," Desmond called to her as she ended her call. "Who were you calling? Was that the owner? Because I'd love to speak with them about this situation." Diane's expression tightened. "The owner is not available, and frankly, this conversation is over. I'm asking you to leave our property immediately." "Even though I haven't done anything wrong?" Desmond pressed. "Even though you've admitted other patrons who are dressed more casually than I am? This is all being broadcast live to thousands of people right now. Are you sure this is how you want Azure Sky Lounge to be represented?" The mention of the live stream audience seemed to make both Diane and Clint more nervous, but they held their ground, Comments indicated that local civil rights organizations were being tagged and alerted to the stream. Reporters were being notified. The hashtag was gaining serious traction. At that moment, Desmond's phone buzzed with a call notification. The name Byron Washington appeared on screen, momentarily interrupting the live stream interface. Byron was his teammate, and, Desmond suddenly remembered, had mentioned something about investing in an upscale lounge downtown. "Hold that thought, everyone," Desmond said to his audience as he declined the call to continue streaming. "I think some very interesting conversations are about to happen." The viewer count hit 15,000 as the afternoon sun continued to illuminate every detail of the discrimination playing out in real time. Comments indicated that major sports media outlets were being alerted to the stream. The story was officially going viral, with no sign of slowing down. Clint and Diane exchanged worried glances as they seemed to grasp the magnitude of what was unfolding. But the damage was already done, broadcast live and recorded by thousands of witnesses who were now sharing the story across every social media platform imaginable. The power of social media was transforming a simple case of discrimination into a national conversation, and Desmond Cole had given his audience front-row seats to witness injustice in real time. The consequences were only just beginning to unfold. Byron Washington was in the middle of reviewing game footage when his phone started buzzing like an angry hornet. The NFL linebacker had just finished his morning workout at the team facility and was settling into his routine film study when notification after notification began flooding his screen. His publicist Maria's name flashed across the display for the third time in 30 seconds. "Maria, what's got you calling me like the building's on fire?" Byron answered, still focused on the defensive formation freeze-framed on his laptop screen. "Byron, we have a massive problem. Your club is trending on Twitter, and it's not good news. There's a live stream going viral of your bouncer discriminating against someone. The video has over 200,000 views already, and it's climbing fast." Byron's blood ran cold. He minimized the game footage and pulled up his social media accounts. His mentions were exploding with angry messages, disappointed fans, and calls for boycotts. The hashtags #FireClintReardon and Azure Sky Discrimination were trending nationally. "Send me the link right now," Byron demanded, his voice tight with growing alarm. As the live stream loaded on his phone, Byron watched in horror as Clint Reardon, his head of security, blocked a well-dressed black man from entering Azure Sky Lounge. The man looked familiar, but Byron couldn't immediately place him through the phone screen. What made his stomach drop was watching Clint's increasingly aggressive behavior while white patrons in similar casual attire walked past without question. "This has got to be some kind of mistake," Byron muttered. But even as he said it, he could see the deliberate nature of Clint's actions. The comments streaming across the video were brutal, with viewers recognizing the discrimination for exactly what it was. Byron grabbed his keys and sprinted toward his car, calling his assistant manager while Maria continued updating him on the rapidly deteriorating situation. No one at the club was answering their phones. The drive to Azure Sky Lounge normally took 20 minutes, but Byron made it in 12. His heart pounding with each new notification that lit up his passenger seat. As he turned the corner toward his establishment, Byron's worst fears materialized before his eyes. A crowd of protesters had already gathered outside Azure Sky Lounge, their voices carrying across the street as they chanted demands for justice. News vans were setting up, and reporters were interviewing angry community members who had seen the viral live stream. Byron parked in his reserved space behind the building and entered through the staff entrance, hoping to avoid the media circus out front. The club's interior felt different somehow, charged with tension and whispered conversations among his remaining staff members. He found Clint Reardon in the security office, scrolling through his own phone with a defiant expression that made Byron's jaw clench. Diane Caldwell, the club manager, stood nearby looking pale but unrepentant. "Clint, what the hell happened out there today?" Byron's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to commanding respect on and off the football field. Clint looked up with a shrug that infuriated Byron even further. "Just enforcing the dress code like always, boss. Guy was trying to start trouble, so I handled it." "Handled it? There are protesters outside my building because of how you handled it. Do you have any idea who that man was? Some troublemaker trying to get attention?" Clint replied dismissively. Byron pulled up the live stream on his tablet and thrust it toward Clint. "That troublemaker is Desmond Cole, the Pro Bowl wide receiver. And more importantly, he's a paying customer who you humiliated in front of hundreds of thousands of people online." The color drained from Clint's face as the reality of his mistake began to sink in. Diane stepped forward, her red blazer wrinkled from stress. "Byron, we were just following protocol. The dress code clearly states." "Don't," Byron cut her off sharply. "I watched the footage. I saw you let in 6 white guys wearing the exact same type of casual clothes while blocking Desmond. This isn't about dress codes, and we all know it." Byron's phone rang again, and he glanced at the caller ID to see Gerald Whitman, one of his primary investors. His stomach sank further as he realized the financial implications were just beginning. "Byron, I'm watching the news right now, and I need answers immediately." Gerald's voice was ice cold through the speakerphone. "My company cannot be associated with discriminatory practices. We're reviewing our investment partnership effective immediately." After hanging up, Byron turned to his security system and began pulling up footage from the past month. What he discovered made his hands shake with rage. Video after video showed a clear pattern of Clint and Diane treating black patrons differently than white customers. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. "How long has this been going on?" Byron's voice was deadly quiet. Neither Clint nor Diane answered immediately, their silence confirming his worst suspicions. "I said, how long has this been happening in my establishment?" "Look, Byron, we were just trying to maintain the upscale atmosphere you wanted," Diane finally spoke up. "Some people don't fit the clientele we're trying to attract." Byron stared at her in complete disbelief. "Some people? You mean black people? In a club owned by a black man?" The irony wasn't lost on him, but it made the betrayal cut even deeper. He had trusted these employees to represent his business and his values, only to discover they had been systematically discriminating against people who looked like him. His phone buzzed with another call from Maria. "Byron, Channel 7 News wants a statement in the next hour. 3 more sponsors have pulled out, and your booking agent says the weekend events are being canceled. We're looking at massive financial losses here." Byron ended the call and looked directly at Clint and Diane. "You're both fired, effective immediately. Security will escort you out, and you're banned from this property permanently." "You can't fire us over this," Clint protested. "We were doing our jobs. Your job was to provide professional security services, not to humiliate customers based on their race. Get out of my building before I have you arrested for trespassing." As security escorted his former employees out through the back exit, Byron sank into his office chair and watched the protest growing larger outside his windows. The crowd had doubled in size, and more news crews were arriving by the hour. Curtis Nakamura, one of his bartenders, knocked on the office door. The young man's usual confident demeanor was replaced by visible distress. "Byron, I need to tell you something. I've been wanting to report Clint's behavior for months, but I was afraid I'd lose my job. What happened today isn't isolated. I've seen him turn away dozens of black customers using bogus dress code violations." Byron felt his world crumbling around him. "Why didn't you come to me sooner?" Diane threatened to fire anyone who complained about security procedures. She said you had given them full authority to maintain standards however they saw fit. The depth of the deception hit Byron like a blindside tackle. His own manager had been covering up systematic discrimination while using his name as justification. "Curtis, I want you to document everything you remember. Times, dates, descriptions of incidents. We're going to cooperate fully with whatever investigation comes from this." "Actually, Byron, I won't be here to help with that. I'm putting in my resignation. I can't work somewhere that allowed this to happen for so long. Even with Clint and Diane gone, the damage to this place's reputation is permanent." Byron watched Curtis leave, knowing he wouldn't be the last employee to abandon ship. His phone displayed 47 missed calls and hundreds of text messages, most of them bearing bad news about sponsors, partners, and performers distancing themselves from Azure Sky Lounge. The financial implications were staggering. Between canceled events, withdrawn sponsorships, and potential lawsuits, Byron was looking at losses that could bankrupt the business he had worked years to build. He walked to his window and watched the protesters below, their signs demanding justice for Desmond Cole and accountability for discriminatory practices. The irony was crushing. He had opened Azure Sky Lounge as a way to create opportunities in his community, only to discover it had become a symbol of the very discrimination he had fought against his entire career. Byron's reflection was interrupted by another call from his lawyer, who had been monitoring the situation and preparing for potential legal action. The conversation confirmed his fears. Desmond Cole had every right to pursue both civil and criminal charges, and the documented pattern of discrimination made defending against those charges nearly impossible. As the afternoon wore on, Byron realized that firing Clint and Diane was just the beginning of his problems. The viral nature of the incident meant that millions of people now associated Azure Sky Lounge with racism and discrimination. No amount of damage control could undo the harm that had been done to his reputation and his business. Standing in his office, while protesters chanted outside and his phone continued ringing with more bad news, Byron Washington understood that his dream of building a successful entertainment venue had been destroyed by the very people he had trusted to protect it. The weight of that betrayal, combined with the knowledge that his business had become a source of pain for people in his own community, left him feeling more defeated than any loss on the football field ever had. The viral storm was just beginning, and Byron knew that much worse was yet to come. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Channel 7 newsroom as anchor Brenda Ortega adjusted her red blazer and white blouse, preparing for the lead story that had consumed the airwaves for 48 hours straight. The discrimination incident at Azure Sky Lounge had evolved from a viral social media moment into a full-blown corporate crisis, and the consequences were mounting by the hour. "Good morning. I'm Brenda Ortega with breaking news on the Azure Sky Lounge discrimination scandal," she announced to cameras, her voice carrying the weight of a story that had captured national attention. Major sponsors are fleeing the upscale establishment after footage of bouncer Clint Reardon's discriminatory treatment of NFL star Desmond Cole went viral. Premium liquor brand Stellar Vodka announced this morning they're terminating their exclusive partnership with the club, joining luxury car manufacturer Meridian Motors and high-end watch company Pinnacle Timepieces in withdrawing support. Across town, Clint Reardon sat in his cramped studio apartment, wearing a wrinkled green t-shirt and faded jeans, staring at his phone screen with growing horror. Notification after notification flooded his social media accounts, each message more scathing than the last. His personal information had been leaked online, and the threats were escalating. The security company that employed him had already called that morning, informing him that his license was under review and his employment was terminated effective immediately. His phone buzzed with a call from Channel 12 News. Against his better judgment, Clint answered, desperation creeping into his voice as he agreed to an interview that afternoon. He convinced himself he could explain his side, justify his actions, make people understand he wasn't a racist, just someone doing his job. Meanwhile, in her prestigious downtown law office, civil rights attorney Keisha Simmons reviewed the viral footage for the dozenth time, her red power suit reflecting her determination as she studied every frame of the discriminatory encounter. The fluorescent lighting illuminated case files scattered across her mahogany desk, each one representing years of fighting similar battles against institutional prejudice. Her assistant knocked and entered. "Miss Simmons, I have Desmond Cole's agent online too. They're interested in pursuing legal action." Keisha's eyes lit up with the satisfaction that came from knowing justice might finally be served. She had built her reputation on cases exactly like this one, where clear evidence of discrimination demanded comprehensive legal response. "Put him through," she said, straightening the stack of discrimination law precedents she'd been compiling. The phone conversation with Desmond's representatives lasted 30 minutes, during which Keisha outlined the strength of their case. "We have everything we need," she explained, her voice carrying decades of courtroom experience. "Clear video evidence, multiple witnesses, documented patterns of behavior, and now we'll have media attention that ensures this doesn't get buried or dismissed." At police headquarters, Detective Roy Henderson sat at his metal desk under harsh fluorescent lighting, wearing his standard-issue blue uniform with short sleeves, opening an official investigation file into discriminatory practices at Azure Sky Lounge. His muscular frame leaned forward as he reviewed the initial complaints that had flooded the department since the video went viral. "Henderson," called his sergeant from across the bullpen, "you've got witnesses lining up to give statements about that nightclub case. Seems like this Reardon character has been pulling this routine for months." Roy nodded grimly, knowing that what started as a single incident was revealing itself as systematic discrimination. The pattern was becoming clear, and the legal implications would be severe. His investigation would need to be thorough and unassailable. The first witness to come forward was Curtis Nakamura, a bartender who had worked at Azure Sky for 2 years. Curtis sat nervously in the interview room, wearing an orange polo shirt and dark slacks, fluorescent lights casting sharp shadows as he prepared to reveal what he'd witnessed during his employment. "I should have spoken up sooner," Curtis admitted, guilt evident in his voice. "But I needed the job, you know." Clint would regularly turn away black customers while letting white people in wearing the exact same clothes, sometimes worse clothes. "I saw him let in white guys wearing torn jeans and sneakers while rejecting black customers in business casual." Detective Henderson took detailed notes as Curtis continued his testimony, describing incident after incident that painted a clear picture of systematic racism. "There was this one night where a black couple showed up, both dressed really nicely, and Clint told them they couldn't come in because of the dress code. 20 minutes later, he let in a group of white college kids wearing backward baseball caps and flip-flops. The validation Curtis provided was exactly what Keisha Simmons needed to build an ironclad case. When word spread that employees were coming forward with additional testimony, the legal foundation grew stronger by the hour. By noon, the financial damage to Azure Sky Lounge was becoming catastrophic. Celebrity endorsements were being withdrawn faster than the management could count. Hip-hop artist Marcus Diamond, who had performed at the club just months earlier, posted a scathing video denouncing the establishment and promising never to return. Professional athletes across multiple sports leagues joined the condemnation, with several announcing plans to boycott any venue that tolerated discrimination. Gerald Whitman, the club's primary investor, paced in his corner office, wearing an expensive blue jacket over his dress shirt, natural skylight streaming through windows as he calculated the devastating financial impact. His investment portfolio was hemorrhaging value as the scandal spread. Phone calls with other investors had been brutal, with demands for immediate withdrawal of funding. "The numbers are catastrophic," he told his financial advisor during an emergency meeting. "We're looking at complete loss of investment if this continues. The brand is toxic now, completely unsalvageable." The planned high-profile events that generated Azure Sky's primary revenue were canceling en masse. A corporate retreat for a Fortune 500 company, scheduled for the following week, was moved to a competitor. A charity fundraiser that typically brought in 6 figures was relocated. with organizers citing concerns about associating with the establishment. That afternoon, Clint Reardon's disastrous television interview aired, making the situation exponentially worse. Sitting across from an experienced journalist, wearing the same wrinkled green shirt and jeans, Clint attempted to defend his actions under the harsh studio lights. "Look, I was just doing my job," he insisted, his voice defensive and increasingly agitated. "Every club has standards. We can't just let anyone walk in. It's about maintaining a certain atmosphere, a certain clientele." The interviewer pressed him on the obvious double standard. "But witnesses and video evidence show you admitting white patrons dressed similarly or worse than Mr. Cole. How do you explain that?" Clint's response revealed the prejudice that had driven his actions. "It's different, okay? Some people just don't fit the image we're trying to project. It's not about race, it's about class, about knowing how to conduct yourself in an upscale environment." His words sparked immediate outrage across social media, with clips of the interview being shared millions of times within hours. The attempted justification only confirmed what everyone already suspected about his motivations, destroying any remaining sympathy he might have garnered. Community response was swift and organized. Monique Jefferson, a prominent community activist, wearing a red blouse and black pants, organized protests outside Azure Sky Lounge that drew hundreds of supporters. Under the bright afternoon sun, protesters chanted for justice, while news cameras captured the growing movement, demanding accountability. "This isn't just about one incident," Monique declared to the assembled crowd, her voice carrying over the street noise. "This is about a pattern of discrimination that happens every day in establishments across this city. We're here to say that behavior has consequences, and those consequences start now." The solidarity growing around Desmond Cole's case represented validation that his decision to stand up to discrimination was creating meaningful change. Support poured in from unexpected sources, including other NFL players, civil rights organizations, and ordinary citizens who recognized the broader importance of the fight. As evening approached, Byron Washington sat in his home office, reviewing bankruptcy attorneys' contact information while natural light faded outside his windows. His blue jacket hung on a nearby chair as he contemplated the collapse of his business venture. The club that had represented his success outside of football was crumbling under the weight of discrimination he had been unaware was occurring. Phone calls from creditors had been relentless. Insurance companies were investigating whether discriminatory practices voided coverage. Legal experts were warning him of potential personal liability for the systematic discrimination that had occurred under his ownership. The irony wasn't lost on him that as a black business owner, his establishment had been systematically excluding black customers. The betrayal by his management team felt personal, but the financial consequences were devastating and unavoidable. Detective Henderson concluded his preliminary investigation that evening, compiling evidence that would support both criminal charges and civil litigation. The testimonies from Curtis Nakamura and other witnesses had revealed a clear pattern of discriminatory practices that went far beyond a single incident with Desmond Cole. As news of the expanding investigation spread, the anticipation of legal resolution grew throughout the community. Keisha Simmons prepared to file comprehensive charges that would address not just the individual discrimination, but the systematic nature of the club's practices. The price of Clint Reardon's prejudice was becoming clear. His security career was over, his reputation destroyed, and legal consequences loomed. The club faced bankruptcy, employees were losing jobs, and investors were fleeing. But for Desmond Cole and the community rallying around him, the consequences represented something more significant: proof that standing up to discrimination, documenting injustice, and demanding accountability could create real change. The viral moment had evolved into a movement, and the legal reckoning was just beginning. The downtown law offices of Simmons & Associates buzzed with unprecedented energy on this bright Tuesday morning. Fluorescent lights illuminated every corner of the modern conference room where Keisha Simmons sat across from Desmond Cole, her red blazer and matching skirt a striking contrast against the polished mahogany table. Natural skylight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting sharp shadows across the meticulously organized legal documents spread before them. Keisha adjusted her reading glasses, her fingers drumming against the table as she reviewed the final draft of what would become one of the most significant discrimination lawsuits filed in the city's history. Desmond Cole wore a green polo shirt and dark blue jeans, his posture confident yet focused as he listened to his attorney outline their legal strategy. "Desmond, what we're filing today isn't just a lawsuit," Keisha explained, her voice carrying the weight of decades fighting civil rights battles. "This is a comprehensive attack on systematic discrimination. We're going after Azure Sky Lounge, Clint Reardon personally, and the parent company that allowed this culture to flourish." The lawsuit documents stretched across multiple folders, each section methodically detailing violations of civil rights laws, public accommodation statutes, and federal anti-discrimination regulations. Keisha had spent weeks crafting a legal argument that would set precedent for future cases while ensuring maximum accountability for all parties involved. "The evidence is overwhelming," she continued, pulling up security footage on her laptop. "We have your live stream, bystander recordings, and now internal surveillance that Byron Washington provided voluntarily. But that's just the beginning." Desmond Cole leaned forward, watching as Keisha clicked through timestamp after timestamp of discriminatory incidents at Azure Sky Lounge. Each clip showed similar patterns: black patrons being turned away while white customers in identical attire were welcomed inside. The systematic nature of the discrimination became undeniable when viewed in sequence. "How many other incidents are we talking about?" Desmond Cole asked, though he suspected the answer would be disturbing. 47 documented cases over the past 18 months, Keisha replied grimly. Curtis Nakamura provided us with detailed logs he kept secretly, documenting every discriminatory incident he witnessed. That young man risked his job to gather this evidence, knowing someday it would matter. The revelation sent a chill through Desmond Cole as he realized his experience represented merely the tip of an iceberg. Dozens of people had faced the same humiliation, the same blatant discrimination, but lacked his platform to fight back effectively. "What about Clint Reardon specifically?" Desmond Cole inquired, his voice carrying controlled anger at the bouncer who had started this entire ordeal. Keisha's expression hardened as she pulled up another file. Detective Roy Henderson's background investigation revealed a disturbing pattern. Clint Reardon has worked at 6 different establishments over the past 5 years. Each venue received multiple discrimination complaints during his employment, though none were properly investigated or prosecuted. The pattern painted a picture of a serial discriminator, someone who moved from job to job, leaving a trail of violated civil rights in his wake. Previous employers had simply transferred the problem rather than addressing it, allowing Clint Reardon to continue his discriminatory behavior unchecked. 3 former co-workers have agreed to testify about his explicit racist statements and deliberate targeting of black customers, Keisha added. "We have him dead to rights on both the individual incident and the broader pattern of discrimination." Desmond Cole felt a surge of vindication knowing that justice was finally catching up with Clint Reardon. The evidence was mounting systematically, creating an airtight case that would be impossible to dismiss or minimize. "Now here's where things get interesting," Keisha said, opening another folder. "The club's insurance company, Metropolitan Risk Management, has officially refused coverage for this lawsuit. They claim systematic discrimination violates their policy terms, leaving Azure Sky Lounge financially exposed for the full settlement amount." The implications were staggering. Without insurance coverage, the club would face the complete financial burden of legal settlements, attorney fees, and punitive damages. The insurance company's decision effectively signaled their belief that discrimination was so endemic at Azure Sky Lounge that coverage was void. "Byron Washington is cooperating fully with our investigation," Keisha continued. "He's provided internal documents, employee records, and complete access to security systems. He knows his business is finished, but he's trying to do the right thing now. Desmond Cole felt conflicted about his teammate's situation. Byron Washington was a victim of his employees' actions, yet as the owner, he bore ultimate responsibility for creating an environment where discrimination flourished unchecked. "What kind of settlement are we looking at?" Desmond Cole asked. Though money had never been his primary motivation for pursuing legal action, conservative estimates suggest 7 figures for the individual discrimination claim alone, Keisha replied. "But we're also seeking punitive damages, policy changes across the hospitality industry, and mandatory sensitivity training for similar establishments. The financial component is just one piece of comprehensive justice." The scope of their legal action extended far beyond monetary compensation. They were demanding systematic changes that would prevent future discrimination while holding the entire industry accountable for inclusive practices. "The timing couldn't be better," Keisha added. 3 other discrimination cases against nightclubs and restaurants have emerged since your incident went viral. The public attention has emboldened other victims to come forward with their experiences. Desmond Cole realized his decision to livestream that confrontation had created a domino effect, inspiring others who had suffered similar discrimination to seek justice. His individual stand was becoming a broader movement for civil rights in public accommodations. "Monique Jefferson has been instrumental in building community support," Keisha noted, referencing the prominent civil rights activist who had taken up their cause. "She's organized boycotts of 17 related businesses, demanding they implement anti-discrimination policies or face economic consequences." The community response had exceeded everyone's expectations. Monique Jefferson, wearing her characteristic red dress and blue jacket during televised interviews, had mobilized grassroots support that transformed individual legal action into collective activism. "The boycotts are having real impact," Keisha continued. 5 venues have already implemented new training programs and hired diversity consultants. The industry is taking notice that discrimination carries serious financial consequences. Desmond Cole felt empowered, knowing their legal action was creating ripple effects throughout the hospitality industry. Businesses were proactively changing policies rather than risk facing similar lawsuits and public backlash. "Let's talk about the parent company," Keisha said, shifting to another section of their lawsuit. Prestige Entertainment Group owns 43 venues across 6 states. "Our investigation revealed similar discrimination patterns at multiple locations, suggesting systematic corporate policies rather than isolated incidents." The revelation expanded their case exponentially. Rather than fighting a single discriminatory bouncer or club, they were challenging an entire corporate culture that enabled and encouraged discriminatory practices across multiple venues and jurisdictions. Federal investigators are now examining Prestige Entertainment Group's operations nationwide, Keisha added. "Your case has opened the door to a much broader investigation of systematic discrimination in the hospitality industry." Desmond Cole understood they had uncovered something far more significant than a single incident of discrimination. Their legal action was exposing systematic civil rights violations that demanded comprehensive federal intervention. "What's Clint Reardon's legal exposure?" Desmond Cole asked, wanting to understand the consequences facing the man who had started this entire ordeal. "Substantial," Keisha replied with satisfaction. "Individual civil rights violations, conspiracy charges for systematic discrimination, and potential criminal prosecution for violating federal public accommodation laws. His legal fees alone will bankrupt him before we reach settlement." The comprehensive legal assault ensured Clint Reardon would face consequences on multiple levels. Civil lawsuits, criminal charges, and professional sanctions would combine to deliver justice proportional to the damage his discrimination had caused. Detective Roy Henderson's investigation uncovered evidence that Clint Reardon received explicit instructions from management to restrict access for Black customers, Keisha continued. That transforms individual discrimination into conspiracy dramatically increasing potential penalties. The evidence painted a picture of institutional discrimination flowing from management directives rather than individual prejudice. Such systematic violation of civil rights carried enhanced penalties under federal law. We've also discovered financial incentives tied to maintaining certain customer demographics, Keisha added grimly. Management bonuses were partially based on maintaining what they called preferred clientele ratios. It's explicit economic discrimination. Desmond Cole felt his anger rising as the full scope of systematic discrimination became clear. This wasn't individual prejudice, but calculated economic discrimination designed to exclude black customers while maintaining plausible deniability. The evidence is so overwhelming that settlement negotiations are already beginning informally, Keisha revealed. Their attorneys know they can't win at trial, so they're exploring resolution options before this becomes even more public. The defendants' willingness to negotiate demonstrated their recognition that the evidence was insurmountable. Settlement discussions represented acknowledgement of guilt and acceptance that significant consequences were inevitable. "What are our settlement demands?" Desmond Cole inquired, trusting Keisha's judgment on appropriate compensation and policy changes. "Financial compensation commensurate with the discrimination and emotional distress," Keisha outlined. "Complete policy overhaul across all Prestige Entertainment Group venues, mandatory sensitivity training for all employees, independent monitoring of compliance for 5 years, and public apology acknowledging systematic discrimination." The comprehensive settlement demands ensured that justice extended beyond monetary compensation to include systematic changes preventing future discrimination. Real accountability required transforming the corporate culture that enabled discriminatory practices. Most importantly, Keisha emphasized, "We're demanding the creation of an industry-wide anti-discrimination fund that provides legal support for future victims. Your case will establish resources to help others fight similar discrimination." Desmond Cole felt profound satisfaction knowing their legal action would create lasting infrastructure to support civil rights enforcement. They were building systematic change that extended far beyond individual justice to collective empowerment. "The media attention has been crucial," Keisha noted. Reporter Brenda Ortega's investigative series has kept pressure on defendants while educating the public about systematic discrimination in hospitality. Public opinion is overwhelmingly on our side. The sustained media coverage had maintained public focus on their case while encouraging other discrimination victims to come forward. Brenda Ortega's reporting had transformed their individual legal action into a broader social justice movement. "Community support continues growing," Keisha added. Monique Jefferson's organization has documented similar discrimination at dozens of venues, creating a comprehensive database of civil rights violations across the entertainment industry. The grassroots activism had evolved into systematic documentation of discrimination patterns, providing evidence for additional legal action while demonstrating the pervasive nature of civil rights violations in public accommodations. "Timeline-wise, we're looking at settlement within 60 days, Keisha predicted. "The defendants simply cannot afford prolonged litigation with this much evidence and public attention. They'll settle to minimize damage and avoid criminal prosecution." Desmond Cole felt anticipation building as justice approached. The comprehensive nature of their legal action ensured that settlement would deliver meaningful consequences while creating systematic changes preventing future discrimination. "One more thing," Keisha said, her expression becoming serious. "The success of this case is inspiring similar lawsuits nationwide. We're receiving calls from attorneys in 12 states requesting our documentation and legal strategies. Your stand is becoming a template for civil rights enforcement." The realization that their legal action was inspiring systematic civil rights enforcement across the country filled Desmond Cole with profound satisfaction. His decision to live-stream that confrontation had catalyzed a national movement for equal treatment in public accommodations. As they concluded their meeting, Keisha gathered the legal documents that would reshape how discrimination cases were prosecuted and settled. The comprehensive nature of their lawsuit established new standards for accountability while demonstrating the power of combining individual courage with systematic legal action. Desmond, when we file these papers this afternoon, we're not just seeking justice for you, Keisha concluded. We're establishing precedent that will protect countless others from facing the discrimination you experienced. That's the real victory here. Desmond Cole left the law offices feeling empowered by the comprehensive legal action they had constructed. Justice was approaching systematically, ensuring that Clint Reardon, Azure Sky Lounge, and Prestige Entertainment Group would face consequences proportional to their discriminatory actions, while creating lasting change preventing future civil rights violations. The legal reckoning had begun, and the evidence was overwhelming. The morning sun cast sharp shadows across the courthouse steps as Monique Jefferson adjusted the microphone at the podium. Behind her, a diverse crowd of supporters held signs reading "Equal Access for All" and "Justice for Desmond." The community activist wore a red blazer over black pants, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had fought countless battles for civil rights. She looked out at the gathering crowd, cameras from multiple news stations positioned strategically around the plaza. What happened to Desmond Cole at Azure Sky Lounge wasn't an isolated incident, Monique declared, her voice echoing off the concrete walls. It's part of a pattern of discrimination that has gone unchecked in our city for far too long. Today, we say enough is enough. The crowd erupted in applause as Desmond Cole stepped forward, wearing a green polo shirt and khaki pants. The fluorescent lights from the nearby office building windows reflected off his determined expression. He had spent sleepless nights thinking about this moment, knowing that his platform as an NFL player could either amplify change or fade into meaningless celebrity noise. "When I was denied entry to that club, I could have walked away," Desmond said, gripping the podium edges. "I could have gone somewhere else, stayed quiet, moved on with my privileged life. But I realized that every time we stay silent, we give permission for discrimination to continue." In the crowd, Curtis Nakamura nodded vigorously. The former Azure Sky employee wore an orange button-down shirt and dark jeans, having quit his job the week before to protest the club's discriminatory practices. He held a sign that read, "I witnessed the truth," and felt a surge of pride at finally being part of the solution rather than complicit in the problem. Monique Jefferson took the microphone again, her red blazer catching the natural sunlight as clouds shifted overhead. "Starting today, we're launching the Equal Access Initiative. We'll be visiting businesses throughout the city, documenting their practices and holding them accountable. No more will discriminatory establishments hide behind dress codes and arbitrary policies." The crowd's energy was palpable as news reporter Brenda Ortega positioned herself for the best shot. She wore a red dress with black heels, knowing this story would likely lead the evening news. The ripple effects of the Azure Sky incident were expanding beyond anyone's initial expectations. 3 blocks away, Gerald Whitman sat in his corner office, watching the live coverage on his wall-mounted television. The wealthy investor wore a blue jacket over pressed slacks, his hands trembling slightly as he reached for his phone. The call he was about to make would seal Azure Sky Lounge's fate, but his reputation as a socially conscious businessman was more valuable than any single investment. "Byron, we need to talk," Gerald said when the call connected. "I'm watching this protest, and I can't be associated with this anymore. I'm pulling my funding." On the other end of the line, Byron Washington sat in his empty club, surrounded by unpaid bills and canceled contracts. He wore a green sweater and blue jeans, looking far different from the successful businessman he had been just weeks earlier. The fluorescent lights above cast harsh shadows across his face as he processed the words that would end his business. "I understand," Byron replied quietly. "I would make the same decision if I were in your position." Meanwhile, at the NFL training facility across town, Players began gathering in the locker room as word spread about Desmond's activism. Marcus Thompson, a veteran linebacker wearing an orange practice jersey and black shorts, stood on a bench to address his teammates. "What happened to Desmond could happen to any of us," Marcus announced. "We have platforms, we have influence, and we have a responsibility to use them. Who's with me?" Hands shot up across the room as players committed to joining the movement. The natural light streaming through the facility's skylights illuminated faces filled with determination and solidarity. Social media posts began flooding from verified accounts as NFL players shared their own experiences with discrimination. Back at the courthouse, Monique Jefferson was fielding questions from reporters when her phone buzzed with notifications. The hashtag #EqualAccessNow was trending nationally, with celebrities and activists across the country sharing their support. She smiled, knowing that viral momentum could translate into real policy changes. Ms. Jefferson called out a reporter from the back. "What specific changes are you demanding from local businesses?" "We want transparent policies posted publicly, staff training on unconscious bias, and accountability measures when discrimination occurs," she replied firmly. "We're not asking for special treatment. We're demanding equal treatment." Desmond Cole stepped forward again, the overhead fluorescent lighting from the courthouse entrance creating a natural spotlight effect. "I've been contacted by victims of discrimination at restaurants, hotels, retail stores, and entertainment venues across the city. This isn't about one club or one bouncer. This is about a culture that needs to change." In a downtown law office, Keisha Simmons watched the press conference while reviewing files from similar cases. The civil rights attorney wore a red suit jacket and black skirt, her desk covered with testimonies from other discrimination victims. The Azure Sky case had opened floodgates, with people finally feeling empowered to share their experiences. Her phone rang constantly with new clients seeking representation. Each story followed similar patterns: arbitrary enforcement of policies, different standards for different races, and humiliating treatment that victims had previously endured in silence. "This is exactly what we hoped would happen," Keisha said to her paralegal. "One person's courage to stand up can inspire an entire movement." Across the city, the effects were rippling through the business community. Restaurant owners reviewed their policies, security companies implemented new training protocols, and entertainment venues faced sudden scrutiny from customers and employees alike. The comfortable status quo that had allowed discrimination to flourish was crumbling under public pressure. At Azure Sky Lounge, Byron Washington walked through the empty space one final time. The overhead fluorescent lights hummed softly, casting everything in stark clarity. Tables that once hosted expensive parties now sat covered in dust. The bar that had served overpriced cocktails to exclusive clientele was stripped of its premium liquors, repossessed by creditors. He thought about Desmond Cole, his former teammate, who had become an unlikely activist. The irony wasn't lost on him that his own business had become the catalyst for positive change, even as it destroyed everything he had built. His green sweater felt heavier as he realized that his dream of owning a successful nightclub was ending. But perhaps something more important was beginning. The impact extended beyond individual businesses to city government. Mayor Patricia Williams, wearing a red blazer over navy pants, called an emergency meeting with the city council to address the growing protests. The natural light streaming through the council chamber's large windows illuminated concerned faces as officials realized they needed to act swiftly to prevent further unrest. "We need comprehensive anti-discrimination ordinances with real enforcement mechanisms," the mayor announced. "The current complaints process is clearly inadequate." Council members who had previously ignored discrimination complaints now scrambled to propose new legislation. The political pressure from the Equal Access Initiative was forcing long overdue policy discussions that might never have happened without Desmond Cole's viral livestream. Meanwhile, Monique Jefferson organized follow-up protests at 3 other businesses that had been accused of discriminatory practices. Her red blazer had become a symbol of the movement, easily recognizable at each demonstration. The community response was overwhelming, with volunteers offering time, resources, and testimonies to support the cause. "Change doesn't happen overnight," she told a group of young activists who had joined the movement. "But when enough voices speak together, the powerful have no choice but to listen." At his apartment, Desmond Cole sat at his kitchen table, reviewing messages from supporters worldwide. The natural light from his windows cast everything in sharp relief as he realized the magnitude of what had begun with a simple attempt to enter a nightclub. His green polo shirt bore a small pin reading "Equal Access" that had become the movement's unofficial symbol. Professional athletes from other sports were now joining the cause. Basketball players shared stories of restaurant discrimination. Soccer players highlighted hotel incidents, and baseball stars discussed retail profiling. The sports world's collective voice was amplifying the message beyond what any single person could achieve. Celebrity support expanded the reach even further. Actors, musicians, and influencers used their platforms to highlight the Equal Access Initiative, sharing personal experiences and encouraging fans to examine their own communities for discrimination. The movement was evolving from a local protest into a national conversation. Local businesses began proactively changing their practices rather than risk becoming the next target of scrutiny. Training programs were implemented, policies were revised, and staff members who had previously enforced discriminatory practices found themselves unemployed or re-educated. Curtis Nakamura had become an unexpected spokesperson for employees who witnessed discrimination but felt powerless to act. His orange button-down shirt and earnest demeanor made him relatable to service industry workers across the city. He spoke at community centers and union meetings, encouraging others to document and report discriminatory practices. "We can't change what we don't acknowledge," Curtis told a group of hotel workers. "Every time we stay silent, we become complicit in the system we claim to oppose." The economic impact was substantial as discriminatory businesses faced boycotts, while inclusive establishments saw increased patronage. Consumer behavior was shifting as people made conscious choices about where to spend their money based on businesses' track records on equality. Byron Washington, despite losing his business, found an unexpected role in the movement. His willingness to cooperate fully with investigations and publicly acknowledge his establishment's failures earned him a measure of respect. He began speaking to business owners about implementing proper oversight and creating inclusive environments. "I thought having a diverse staff was enough," Byron admitted during one presentation. "I learned that good intentions mean nothing without active commitment to equality." As the chapter neared its end, the courthouse steps again filled with supporters for a follow-up rally. Monique Jefferson, still wearing her signature red blazer, looked out at a crowd twice the size of the original gathering. The natural skylight from the overcast day created perfect conditions for the news cameras documenting the movement's growth. 3 weeks ago, one man was denied entry to a nightclub, she announced. Today, we have policy changes at over 50 businesses, new city ordinances under consideration, and a community that refuses to accept discrimination as normal. Desmond Cole joined her at the podium. His green polo shirt and khaki pants, now recognized by supporters who had followed his journey from discrimination victim to civil rights advocate. The fluorescent lights from surrounding buildings created an almost theatrical setting as he prepared to address the crowd. "This movement proves that standing up to injustice creates ripple effects we can't predict," Desmond declared. "Every person who shares their story, every business that changes its practices, every official who passes better laws contributes to progress we can all see and feel." The crowd's applause echoed off the courthouse walls as cameras captured the moment for evening news broadcasts that would carry the story into homes across the nation. What had begun as one man's refusal to accept discriminatory treatment had evolved into a community-wide commitment to equality. that would reshape the city's social landscape for years to come. The Equal Access Initiative had proven that individual courage, combined with community support and strategic activism, could challenge systemic discrimination and create measurable change. The movement would continue growing, but this chapter had established the foundation for everything that would follow. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the downtown courthouse as Desmond Cole adjusted his green dress shirt and navy blazer. 6 months after the discrimination incident at Azure Sky Lounge, this Tuesday morning would finally bring resolution. The overhead fluorescent lights illuminated the marble hallway where reporters gathered, their cameras ready to capture what many considered a landmark civil rights case. Keisha Simmons approached, her red blazer and black slacks commanding attention as she carried a briefcase filled with evidence that would reshape the hospitality industry. Her expression radiated confidence as she greeted her client. "This is it, Desmond," she said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. 6 months of preparation comes down to today. The defendants know they're facing overwhelming evidence. Desmond nodded, feeling the weight of not just his own experience, but the dozens of similar cases that had emerged since his live stream went viral. The courthouse buzzed with activity as supporters, media, and legal teams prepared for what promised to be a historic settlement hearing. News reporter Brenda Ortega positioned herself near the entrance, her red blouse bright under the natural lighting as she prepared her live broadcast. The story had maintained national attention, becoming a symbol of the fight against systemic discrimination in American businesses. Inside the courtroom, Judge Patricia Martinez reviewed the settlement documents that represented months of intense negotiations. The fluorescent lighting cast sharp shadows across the mahogany furniture as lawyers on both sides made final preparations. Byron Washington sat in the gallery, his orange polo shirt and dark pants reflecting his complicated position as both victim and defendant in the case. His club's discriminatory practices had destroyed his business, but his cooperation with investigators had helped build the comprehensive case that now demanded justice. The defense attorney representing Clint Reardon whispered urgently to his client, who wore an ill-fitting blue suit that seemed to emphasize his fallen status. Once confident and aggressive, Clint now appeared deflated as he faced the consequences of his discriminatory actions. "Your Honor," Keisha Simmons began as proceedings commenced, "this case represents more than individual discrimination. Evidence shows systematic exclusion of Black patrons at Azure Sky Lounge and affiliated establishments. Security footage reveals dozens of incidents where white patrons in identical attire were admitted, while Black customers faced arbitrary rejection." The settlement documents outlined unprecedented financial compensation for Desmond Cole. But more importantly, they mandated sweeping policy changes across the hospitality industry. Businesses would now face mandatory bias training, regular compliance audits, and severe penalties for discriminatory practices. Judge Martinez reviewed the terms carefully. This settlement establishes important precedent for civil rights enforcement in commercial establishments. The defendants agree to financial compensation, policy reforms, and ongoing monitoring to prevent future discrimination. Clint Reardon's attorney attempted damage control, but the evidence was overwhelming. Security footage, witness testimony, and documented patterns of discrimination left no room for denial. The former bouncer faced not only civil liability, but criminal charges for violating civil rights laws. Detective Roy Henderson, dressed in his standard blue uniform with long sleeves, had spent months investigating discriminatory practices at entertainment venues across the city. His comprehensive report revealed systemic problems that extended far beyond Azure Sky Lounge. The investigation uncovered coordinated discrimination at multiple establishments. Detective Henderson testified, text messages between security staff revealed explicit instructions to restrict Black patrons, using fabricated dress code violations. The criminal charges against Clint Reardon represented a significant escalation in civil rights enforcement. Prosecutors argued that his actions constituted intentional deprivation of civil rights under federal law, carrying potential prison time and permanent prohibition from security work. As the settlement hearing concluded, Desmond Cole felt a profound sense of vindication. The legal victory validated his decision to document and fight the discrimination rather than simply walking away. But the triumph extended beyond personal satisfaction to systemic change that would protect countless others. Outside the courthouse, Keisha Simmons addressed the gathered media. Her red blazer caught the midday sunlight as she outlined the broader implications of their legal victory. This settlement sends a clear message that discrimination has consequences, she declared. Businesses cannot hide behind selective enforcement of arbitrary rules to exclude customers based on race. Today's ruling establishes legal precedent that will protect civil rights in commercial settings nationwide. The financial settlement represented the largest discrimination payout in the state's history, but Desmond Cole had already announced his plans for the money. Rather than personal enrichment, he intended to purchase the failed Azure Sky Lounge building and transform it into a community resource. Byron Washington approached Desmond after the proceedings, his expression reflecting the complex emotions of someone whose business decisions had enabled discrimination. The former NFL teammates faced each other under the bright courthouse lights, 6 months of legal proceedings between them. "I know this doesn't fix what happened," Byron said quietly, "but I want you to know that cooperation with your case wasn't just legal strategy. Learning about the discrimination at my club changed everything I thought I knew about running a business." Desmond extended his hand, recognizing that Byron's cooperation had been crucial to achieving comprehensive justice. "The important thing is that we're creating change that goes beyond both of us. Other people won't have to face what I experienced." The ripple effects of the legal victory were already evident across the city. Gerald Whitman, the wealthy investor who had withdrawn funding from Azure Sky Lounge, now faced scrutiny of his other business interests. Community activist Monique Jefferson had documented discriminatory practices at venues associated with his investment portfolio. Curtis Nakamura, the former club employee whose testimony had strengthened the case, felt vindicated by the settlement. His decision to speak out about witness discrimination had cost him his job initially, but the legal victory confirmed that his conscience had guided him correctly. "Seeing justice served makes losing that job worthwhile," Curtis reflected. "No paycheck is worth staying silent about discrimination." Detective Henderson's investigation had expanded beyond the immediate case to examine business licensing procedures that had allowed discriminatory establishments to operate with impunity. The reforms emerging from his work would require bias training for security personnel and regular civil rights compliance audits. The hospitality industry faced a new reality where discriminatory practices carried severe financial and legal consequences. Insurance companies began requiring bias training and compliance documentation before providing coverage to entertainment venues. Keisha Simmons had built on the Azure Sky Lounge victory to file additional cases against other discriminatory establishments. The legal precedent created a framework for challenging systematic exclusion practices that had operated in legal gray areas. "This case opened the floodgates," she explained to reporters. "Victims who previously felt powerless now understand they have legal recourse. We're seeing reports of discrimination at venues that thought they were untouchable." The criminal proceedings against Clint Reardon moved forward separately from the civil settlement. His security license had been permanently revoked, ending a career built on intimidation and discrimination. The man who had once wielded arbitrary power over club entry now faced potential imprisonment for violating civil rights. As news of the settlement spread, Desmond Cole received messages of support from across the country. Professional athletes, civil rights advocates, and ordinary citizens who had faced similar discrimination expressed gratitude for his willingness to fight rather than remain silent. The transformation of Azure Sky Lounge from exclusive club to community center symbolized the broader changes emerging from the legal victory. Desmond Cole's announcement that he would purchase and renovate the building represented justice served through positive action. Monique Jefferson had worked tirelessly to maintain public attention on the case throughout the legal proceedings. Her activism had expanded the conversation beyond individual discrimination to examine systematic exclusion practices across the entertainment industry. This victory belongs to everyone who has ever been turned away from a business because of their race, she declared at a community rally following the settlement. Desmond Cole's courage to live-stream that discrimination and fight in court creates protection for all of us. The broader policy changes mandated by the settlement extended beyond individual businesses to industry-wide reforms. Trade associations now required member establishments to implement bias training and maintain documentation proving compliance with anti-discrimination laws. Detective Henderson's investigation had revealed the extent to which discriminatory practices had been normalized in the hospitality industry. His recommendations for licensing reform would prevent individuals with histories of civil rights violations from working in positions of public access control. The financial impact on Azure Sky Lounge had been devastating but deserved. Byron Washington's declaration of bankruptcy represented the ultimate consequence of allowing discrimination to flourish within his establishment. The building that had once symbolized exclusion would soon become a beacon of community inclusion. As the legal proceedings concluded, participants reflected on the journey from discrimination to justice. 6 months earlier, Clint Reardon had wielded arbitrary power to exclude Desmond Cole from a public accommodation. Now that same man faced criminal charges while his victim had achieved not only personal vindication but systematic change. The courthouse steps filled with supporters celebrating the legal victory. Under the bright afternoon sun, the diverse crowd represented the community that had rallied around Desmond Cole's fight for justice. Their presence demonstrated that individual courage could inspire collective action. Keisha Simmons packed her legal documents with satisfaction, knowing that the precedent established by this case would protect countless others from discrimination. The settlement represented more than financial compensation. It created legal tools for challenging systematic exclusion that had operated without consequence for too long. Detective Henderson submitted his final report on the investigation, documenting not only the specific discrimination at Azure Sky Lounge, but the broader patterns that enabled such practices across the hospitality industry. His work would influence policy reforms, extending far beyond this individual case. The transformation ahead seemed as significant as the legal victory achieved. Desmond Cole's plan to convert the former club into a community center represented the ultimate triumph over discrimination, turning a symbol of exclusion into a resource for inclusion and empowerment. As the sun set over the courthouse, participants in the historic legal victory dispersed to share news of the settlement with their communities. The precedent established would influence civil rights enforcement for years to come, ensuring that Desmond Cole's willingness to document and fight discrimination would protect future generations from similar experiences. Justice had been served on multiple levels: legal, financial, and social. The systematic changes mandated by the settlement would reshape an entire industry, while the criminal charges against Clint Reardon demonstrated that discriminatory actions carry serious consequences. Most importantly, the community center rising from the ashes of Azure Sky Lounge would stand as permanent testimony that positive change can emerge from the fight against injustice. The morning sun cast brilliant rays through the floor-to-ceiling windows of what was once Azure Sky Lounge. Desmond Cole stood in the center of the transformed space, wearing a crisp green polo shirt and dark blue jeans, surveying the remarkable changes that had taken place over the past year. Where expensive leather furniture and crystal chandeliers once symbolized exclusivity, colorful banners now welcomed everyone. Computer stations lined one wall, their screens glowing under the bright fluorescent lighting. Art supplies covered tables where children would soon create masterpieces. A small library corner featured books by authors of every background, their spines creating a rainbow of knowledge and possibility. Desmond ran his hand along the polished wood of what had been the bar, now converted into a reception desk. The irony wasn't lost on him that this very space, where he'd been denied entry because of the color of his skin, would today open its doors to serve the entire community. The Cole Community Center represented more than just a business transformation. It embodied the power of turning pain into purpose, discrimination into determination, and exclusion into inclusion. "Mr. Cole, the catering truck just arrived," called out Marcus Thompson, a young black man wearing an orange t-shirt and blue jeans who served as the center's program coordinator. Marcus had been one of the first hires, a recent college graduate who'd struggled to find opportunities despite his impressive qualifications. Now he managed youth programs, job training workshops, and community events with the enthusiasm of someone who understood the center's deeper mission. "Perfect timing," Desmond replied, checking his watch. The grand opening celebration would begin in just 2 hours, and despite months of planning, nervous energy coursed through him. This wasn't just another ribbon-cutting ceremony. Media outlets from across the country had confirmed attendance. Community leaders, civil rights advocates, and dozens of families who would benefit from the center's programs were all coming together to witness something unprecedented. Keisha Simmons entered through the main doors, her red blazer and black slacks creating a striking professional appearance under the natural skylight streaming from above. The civil rights attorney who had fought tirelessly for justice in Desmond's discrimination case now served on the center's board of directors. She carried a folder of legal documents that had finalized the property transfer and established the center's nonprofit status. "Everything looks incredible," Keisha said, her voice filled with genuine admiration. "A year ago, when we first discussed your vision for this place, I knew you were serious about creating change, but seeing it come to life like this exceeds everything I imagined." Desmond smiled, remembering those early conversations when the legal battle was still raging and the future seemed uncertain. "There were moments I wondered if we'd ever get here. The resistance from some city council members, the zoning challenges, the fundraising obstacles. But every time I felt discouraged, I remembered why we were fighting." The transformation hadn't been easy or quick. After winning the discrimination lawsuit and receiving a substantial settlement, Desmond had faced skepticism from various quarters. Some questioned whether an NFL player could successfully run a community center. Others wondered if the project was just a publicity stunt designed to enhance his image. Local politicians had initially resisted the zoning changes necessary to convert the commercial space into a community facility, but Desmond had persevered, drawing on the same determination that had carried him from a challenging childhood through college football success to NFL stardom. He'd assembled a team of experts, from architects who specialized in community spaces to educators who understood youth development programs. Every decision had been guided by input from neighborhood residents who would actually use the center's services. Byron Washington appeared in the doorway, wearing a blue jacket over a white dress shirt and dark slacks. Desmond's former teammate looked remarkably different from the man who had owned Azure Sky Lounge. Gone was the flashy jewelry and expensive designer clothing. In its place was a more subdued appearance that reflected his journey toward redemption. Byron had lost millions when the club failed, but he'd used the experience to examine his own blind spots about discrimination and privilege. "I wanted to arrive early to help with any last-minute preparations," Byron said, his voice carrying a humility that hadn't been present during his club owner days. "And to thank you again for including me in today's celebration. Despite everything that happened." Desmond extended his hand, which Byron shook gratefully. Their relationship had required considerable healing after the discrimination incident. Byron's initial response had been to focus primarily on damage control for his business, rather than addressing the underlying issues of racism that had infected his establishment. It had taken months of difficult conversations, mediated by mutual friends and counselors, for them to rebuild trust. "We're here because we both learned from what happened," Desmond replied. Your advocacy work with the Restaurant and Hospitality Inclusion Initiative has already prevented similar incidents at dozens of venues. That matters more than past mistakes. Byron nodded, his eyes scanning the transformed space with obvious emotion. He'd testified before the city council about implementing mandatory bias training for hospitality workers. He'd used his industry connections to pressure other business owners to examine their own practices. His reputation had taken years to rebuild, but the work had been genuine and sustained. Detective Roy Henderson arrived wearing a short-sleeved police uniform that looked crisp under the overhead lighting. The veteran officer had been instrumental in investigating the discriminatory practices at Azure Sky Lounge, uncovering evidence that had strengthened the legal case and led to broader reforms in business licensing. His presence today represented law enforcement's commitment to protecting civil rights. Mr. Cole, congratulations on this achievement, Detective Henderson said, surveying the bustling preparation activity. The youth programs you're launching here will make a real difference in crime prevention. When young people have positive outlets and mentorship opportunities, they're far less likely to make choices that lead them into the juvenile justice system. The center's programming had been designed with input from law enforcement, social workers, educators, and community activists. After-school tutoring would help students improve academically. Job training workshops would teach practical skills for employment in growing industries. Cultural programs would celebrate the neighborhood's diversity while building bridges between different communities. Mental health counseling would provide support for families dealing with trauma and stress. Monique Jefferson burst through the doors with characteristic energy, her red dress and black heels clicking against the polished floors as she directed a group of volunteers carrying folding chairs. The community activist had been instrumental in mobilizing grassroots support for the center during its planning phases. She'd organized petition drives, attended city council meetings, and coordinated fundraising events that had generated hundreds of thousands of dollars in donations. Desmond, the news trucks are already setting up outside, Monique announced, her voice bubbling with excitement. Channel 7 wants to interview you in 30 minutes, and the reporter from CNN is requesting a tour of the facilities before the ribbon cutting. The media attention represented validation of the center's significance beyond just local impact. National news outlets were covering the story as an example of how individuals could respond to discrimination by creating positive change rather than simply seeking revenge. Editorial writers had praised Desmond's vision of transformation over retaliation. Curtis Nakamura entered carrying a box of programs for the opening ceremony. The former Azure Sky Lounge employee wore a green button-down shirt and blue slacks, his appearance reflecting the professional growth he'd experienced since leaving the toxic environment of the club. Curtis had been among the first to provide testimony about the discriminatory practices he'd witnessed, risking his job security to support justice. I never imagined when I quit that job that I'd end up working somewhere like this, Curtis said, setting down the box and looking around the vibrant space. As the center's facilities manager, he oversaw maintenance, security, and logistics with the pride of someone who believed deeply in the mission. My parents still can't believe I gave up a higher-paying position to work at a community center, but I've never been happier with a career choice. Curtis's story exemplified the ripple effects of standing up to discrimination. His willingness to speak truth about racist practices had cost him his job at Azure Sky Lounge, but it had also connected him with advocates who helped him find more meaningful work. He'd discovered that financial security meant less than personal integrity and the opportunity to serve others. A commotion outside drew everyone's attention to the windows. Protesters had gathered across the street, carrying signs that expressed opposition to the community center. The group was small but vocal, their presence a reminder that not everyone supported the transformation taking place. Some neighborhood residents had opposed the center, claiming it would bring unwanted activity to the area. Others had made explicitly racial comments about the programming and clientele. Don't let them distract from today's celebration, Keisha advised. noting Desmond's concerned expression. "We anticipated there would be resistance from some quarters. The important thing is that the vast majority of the community supports what you're doing here." Desmond nodded, but the protesters served as a sobering reminder that changing hearts and minds required ongoing effort. Discrimination hadn't disappeared simply because he'd won a legal settlement and transformed a building. The work of creating truly inclusive communities would continue long after today's ribbon-cutting ceremony. Brenda Ortega, the news reporter who had covered the original discrimination incident, arrived with her camera crew. She wore a red blazer and black skirt, her professional appearance unchanged from the day she'd first reported on Desmond's live-streamed encounter with Clint Reardon. Her coverage had been instrumental in bringing national attention to the case and maintaining public interest throughout the legal proceedings. "Mr. Cole, could you reflect on the journey from that day outside Azure Sky Lounge to today's opening?" Brenda asked, positioning herself for the interview with the transformed space visible in the background. Desmond considered the question carefully, aware that his words would reach audiences far beyond the local community. "A year ago, I experienced something that happens to Black Americans every day. We face discrimination in restaurants, stores, clubs, and countless other places where we should be welcomed as customers and human beings. The difference was that I had a platform to fight back and resources to pursue justice." He paused, gathering his thoughts as the camera continued rolling. But winning a lawsuit was never the end goal. Real victory comes from using that experience to create lasting change. This community center represents our refusal to let discrimination have the final word. Instead of allowing hatred to make us bitter, we're choosing to let it make us better. The interview continued for several more minutes, with Desmond explaining the center's programs and his hopes for its impact. He spoke about the importance of providing opportunities for young people, regardless of their background or circumstances. He discussed the partnerships with local schools, businesses, and organizations that would ensure the center's sustainability and growth. As the interview concluded, Gerald Whitman approached hesitantly. The former club investor wore a blue jacket over a white shirt and dark pants, his expensive accessories noticeably absent. Gerald had withdrawn his funding from Azure Sky Lounge after the discrimination incident, but his motivations had been purely financial rather than moral. Today marked his first direct interaction with Desmond since the controversy. "Mr. Cole, I wanted to apologize for my silence during the legal proceedings," Gerald said, his voice barely audible above the preparation activity. "I should have spoken out against the discrimination instead of just protecting my investment. What you've created here puts my cowardice in perspective." Desmond studied the man's face, searching for signs of genuine remorse versus calculated image management. "Apologies are meaningful when they're followed by action," he replied diplomatically. "The center always needs community partners who are committed to our mission of inclusion and opportunity." Gerald nodded eagerly, clearly hoping for a chance at redemption. "I'd like to discuss how my company might support your programs. We have contracts with several businesses that could provide job training placements for your participants." The conversation represented the complex realities of building coalitions for social change. Not every ally would be perfect, and some would join the cause only after it became socially or financially advantageous. But Desmond had learned to accept support wherever it came from, while remaining vigilant about motivations and commitments. Families began gathering outside as the opening ceremony approached. Children pressed their faces against the windows, excited to explore the new facility. Parents chatted with neighbors about the programs their kids would attend. Teenagers who had already participated in pilot programs served as informal ambassadors, explaining the center's offerings to newcomers. The diversity of the crowd reflected Desmond's vision for the center. Black and Latino families stood alongside white and Asian neighbors. Recent immigrants conversed with longtime residents. Elderly community members shared space with college students. The gathering represented the kind of inclusive community that had been denied when discriminatory practices ruled the space. Desmond stepped outside into the bright afternoon sunlight, the natural lighting perfect for the media coverage that would document this historic moment. The crowd erupted in applause as he approached the ribbon stretched across the main entrance. Mayor Patricia Williams, a black woman wearing a red dress suit, joined him with the ceremonial scissors. "Ladies and gentlemen," the mayor announced, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd. "Today we celebrate more than the opening of a new community center. We celebrate the triumph of justice over discrimination, inclusion over exclusion, and hope over hatred." As Desmond prepared to cut the ribbon, his thoughts turned to Clint Reardon, the bouncer whose discriminatory actions had set this entire journey in motion. Through social media and news reports, he'd learned that Clint was now working a series of minimum wage jobs, his security credentials permanently revoked. Legal bills from multiple lawsuits had devastated his finances. His reputation in the industry was permanently damaged. Part of Desmond felt satisfaction at these consequences, but a larger part recognized the tragedy of a life derailed by hatred and prejudice. Clint had chosen discrimination over decency, and he was living with the results of that choice. His downfall served as a warning to others who might consider similar actions, but it also represented the human cost of racism for perpetrators as well as victims. The scissors cut through the ribbon as the crowd cheered and cameras flashed. Children rushed through the open doors to explore their new community center, their laughter and excitement filling the space that had once been marked by exclusion. Adults followed more slowly, many stopping to read the mission statement displayed prominently near the entrance. Inside the center, Desmond moved from group to group, welcoming families and explaining programs. A grandmother inquired about literacy classes for adults. A teenager asked about the music production workshops. A young mother wanted information about childcare during job training sessions. Each conversation reinforced his conviction that the center would serve genuine community needs. The afternoon celebration continued, with performances by local youth groups, demonstrations of the center's technology resources, and presentations by partner organizations. Food trucks provided free meals that brought together people who might never have interacted otherwise. The atmosphere was festive, but also purposeful, with underlying recognition of the serious work ahead. As the sun began to set, casting golden light through the windows, Desmond found a quiet moment to reflect on the day's significance. The Cole Community Center represented the culmination of a year-long journey from discrimination to transformation, but it also marked the beginning of a new phase of community service and advocacy. Standing in the space where he'd once been denied entry, surrounded by families of every background, accessing programs designed to expand opportunity and build inclusion, Desmond felt the profound satisfaction of turning negative experience into positive change. The discrimination he'd faced had been painful and infuriating, but his response had created something larger than personal vindication. The center would serve hundreds of families each year, providing services that could change the trajectory of lives and communities. Young people would develop skills and confidence that would carry them through college and careers. Adults would gain training and support that would help them achieve economic stability. Families would build connections that would strengthen the entire neighborhood. Most importantly, the center stood as proof that discrimination and hatred did not have to have the final word. When people of conscience chose to fight injustice with determination and vision, they could create changes that lasted far beyond any individual incident or legal settlement. As the celebration wound down and families began heading home, Desmond took one final look around the transformed space. Tomorrow, the real work would begin as the center opened its doors for regular programming. There would be challenges ahead, funding concerns, and ongoing resistance from some quarters. But tonight, surrounded by the evidence of what was possible when communities came together around shared values of justice and inclusion, Desmond felt profound hope for the future. The Cole Community Center proved that even the most painful experiences could become catalysts for positive change when met with courage, determination, and vision. The discrimination he'd faced outside Azure Sky Lounge had been wrong and hurtful, but his response had created something beautiful and lasting in transforming a space that had excluded him into one that welcomed everyone. Desmond had demonstrated the power of choosing love over hatred, inclusion over exclusion, and hope over despair. You just heard a story that history tried to overlook. If it stayed with you, take a second to stand with it. Subscribe, share, and help us keep telling the stories that deserve light, not silence.